Serious, what is the creepiest thing that has ever actually happened to you? Woke up in the middle of the night last week and looked over at my boyfriend, sleeping soundly next to me. I was admiring his nice face, thinking what long, pretty eyelashes he had. I was half asleep, comfy and warm, and everything was lovely. As I became more alert, it slowly began to dawn on me that, though he does have very long, pretty eyelashes, they weren't quite that long. That's when the spider started moving across his face. There was a f***ing massive spider on his eyeball. Everything is different now. This happened just a few days ago on my birthday. I was thinking of a friend who passed away this year unexpectedly and was reading our convo on Facebook. The last message I got from him was from the 17th of December 2014. Saying happy birthday. I love and miss you. Don't worry, we'll get together soon. Apostrophe. The exact moment I'm reading this, my iPod that was sitting on the other side of the room started playing a recording of my friend singing The Gambler to me. I hadn't touched my iPod for a few days. Battery fully charged. It was one of the most heart-wrenching moments that I felt like he was sending me a message. And also the creepiest because why that recording? I hadn't listened to it in months and all of the sudden bam. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this. If anybody reads this. Been waiting for a thread like this so I could post my story. I also want to see if anyone in the area heard or saw what happened. This is more scary than creepy. Sorry. This happened in the past 2 years. This happened in Ohio. About 10-15 miles north of Delaware. Rural-ish area. I'm being vague cause I don't want to give too many personal details away. It was summer. And my family was having a cookout. All the adults, including me, are inside talking while the kids were playing outside. We all heard a huge boom. To this day the loudest sound I think I've heard. And no shitty, about 3 seconds later, we all kinda froze when we heard the boom, felt the f***ing wavelength or whatever from it go through the house. This kicked us out of our shock and we ran outside to see if the kids were okay and what happened. It honestly sounded like what I would imagine a nuke or bomb would sound like. The kids were fine. Some were scared. Some didn't hear it, WTF. And we didn't see anything in the sky or around the land that looked off. My boyfriend and I drove around, like 2 miles out in each direction, and saw nothing. I've checked news reports off and on and nothing's been said about it since then. It was so scary and the fact that nothing was said about it in the news is just so weird. There is no way it was just a gunshot. Some of my family tried to say it was after we all calmed down, or anything like that. It was something big and it's gonna drive me nuts for a long time if I don't figure out what it was. Edit. Delaware is a town in Ohio. Guys. I know about the state Delaware lol. I was about 20. My boyfriend at the time was in the post office and I was waiting for him in the car. It was a beautiful day and my boyfriend was taking a while. So I decided to swing my feet outside the car window and lay back in my seat and shut my eyes. I'm happy and comfortable as can be. However, after a few moments I feel someone tickling my feet. I laugh thinking it's my boyfriend. But when I opened my eyes, it was a man that looked like he belonged on Duck Dynasty, intensely staring at me and still tickling my feet. I have not put my feet or my hands outside the car window since. School I used to go to back in my home country always used to warn the students about goblins living in the wooded area behind our school. Probably just a safety measure to keep the kids out of the woods. I curiously made my way there one day and found a mound of dirt. Oddly shaped. Almost like a dog's head. Typical of the kid that I was. I kicked it around, destroying it. I'm not sure what I did after that. But I remember coming back no less than 15-30 minutes later. And the mound of the dirt was exactly the way it was prior to my needlessly destroying it. I bolted out of there. It sounds stupid and a bit bizarre, but it's really the only experience I've had that one can consider paranormal. In my 27 years of life, I was only maybe 6 years old when this happened. So it may just be a memory I somehow fabricated. But it has stuck through the years. I had just gotten home from the gym and was exhausted. I badly needed to shower sleep, so I began to head upstairs. As soon as my bedroom door came into view, what I can only describe as a darkened humanoid looking silhouette creeped out of view from the side of my door frame. I knew 100% that I had seen something and wasn't too keen on investigating it. I grabbed a knife from my kitchen, convinced myself that I was a grown-ass man, counted down from 5, kicked my halfway closed bedroom door all the way open and started yelling like a maniac. I was home alone. I didn't find anything or anyone. I checked each closet thoroughly, under the bed, etc. etc. The usual fuck that places. I closed my door out of habit and began to get undressed when the only light in my room burned out. It was absolutely pitch black, considering how positive I was that I had seen something earlier. I promptly began to freak the FCK out. I had this sense of dread and absolute impending doom. I felt like there was a hand about 2 inches away from the back of my neck. It was such a vivid and terrifying feeling. I bolted in the direction of my door after about 5-10 seconds of being too afraid to act and got the FCK out of my house until the rest of my family came home. Pretty anticlimactic, I know. But to this day I've never felt that convinced of another, and welcome, presence in my house. I work a graveyard shift at a caregiving facility taking care of people with advanced dementia. Basically I watch people die for a living. They beg and cry and moan all night long and then they die. We just had a client die yesterday and it left my co-worker in tears. Now for the creepy part. A client wakes up and tells me someone is outside her window. I figure this must be a hallucination, but she keeps insisting, so I look for a knife, but I was new at the time and didn't know where they kept them locked up. So I end up with a large pointy salad fork. 3 AM. Outside looking for intruders. It turns out she wasn't hallucinating. I didn't catch anyone. Thank God. But my co-worker's bike was stolen that night. This actually happened. I'm serious. The only reason why I even tell people is because my friend saw it with me and we still talk about it to this day. B16 or 17 friend came by to tutor me in calculus about 10 PM at night. I let my friend drive my car to his house. He lived out in the outskirts of town where there is nothing but orchards of almonds. Pass by cattle ranch with lots of lights. Silence in the car. I'm on shotgun and I f***ing see a bull running on its 2 legs like a human. Bull turns its head towards us. Red glowing eyes. Bull looks like it's getting ready to spin around but then evaporates. Look towards my friend and ask him, "Did you see that?" My friend replies, "Did it look like a bull running on 2 legs with red glowing eyes and then it disappeared?" "Yes, I saw that." WTF. That was about 10 years ago. My coworker came in his day off just to tell me that his friend saw the exact same thing 6 years after the incident. My ex didn't see anything. Was on cell phone. 100% true story. Went on a guided cemetery tour at night. About 6 or 7 of us were standing around a tomb listening to the story of how the inhabitant had killed himself with a gun when all of a sudden there was a big flash and the whole sky lit up green with smaller flashes. We found out later that we had witnessed a beat or breaking up. So the tour guide takes a moment, recovers from the surprise, and continues his story about how some decades after the poor chap had killed himself someone broke into his tomb and stole his skull. We then moved on and walked further into the cemetery when we were startled by a loud bang. We shrugged it off as a car backfiring, laughed nervously at how on edge we were and continued the tour. Shortly after we hear a couple more bangs in quick succession, and one of the tour party commented that they were pretty sure they were gunshots. There was another bang. Closer. Definitely a gunshot. Then we saw a light in between some of the headstones and I kid you not, we saw the figure of a man carrying a shotgun, slowly coming from the direction of the tomb we had just been at. We froze. I looked over to the tour guide. thinking it was some prank he plays on all his customers. But he was completely white and was backing away. It was a man with a shotgun and he was walking towards us. He lifted a flashlight and pointed it directly at us. Several of us ducked behind the headstones as he yelled, "Get out of here. What the hell are you doing in this place?" Turns out the city council pays some guy to shoot possums in the cemetery and they forgot to warn the tour company. I was 8. My parents were going through a rough patch in their marriage and my dad was briefly living in a broken down old RV parked in a friend's front yard that wasn't hooked up to anything. Classy, right? No electricity, no water, no nothing. We had to stay there overnight on the weekends we were with him and it always made me nervous. The RV couldn't even be locked. Well, one night I woke up in the middle of night. Pitch black with nothing but a tiny flashlight. And I had to pee worse than I have ever had to pee. I was already scared to death of the dark, so I woke my dad up and pleaded to let me pee in the bathroom or maybe even the sink, but he was grumpy and said no, just pee outside, there's nothing out there. I made my way to the door, stepped out into the grass, lowered my pajamas, and started going, but as soon as I did, some creepy at FCK voice said to me, "Hey kid, come here," along with some rustling in the bushes. I bolted back inside, peeing all over myself, crying in fear, and grabbed the door handle to hold it shut. I heard more rustling outside, but then it stopped, so I let go and with my little dinky flashlight went over to the window, pulled down the blinds just a bit, and shined my light right into a smiling set of teeth. I didn't see the rest of the face as I jumped back into my little bed, throwing the blanket over my head, and cried until the sun came up. People act like I'm being a PSSY when I say I'm not too fond of the dark, but I still can't handle pitch black nights. TLDR edit. Creepy guy wanted me to come to him after seeing me pee and I saw his smiling face right outside an RV's window. It was the first cold ass night and I was alone in my bedroom asleep. F-King music box starts playing. I look around thinking my wife must have bought one. No F-King music box. Woke up twice to a creepy ass music box in the night. Didn't find it anywhere. Scared the shit out of me. However, a month later I was moving stuff and saw the back of my wife's jewelry box and it had a crank. Sure enough, turning it played the music box shit. I didn't know that. Apparently the room getting cold contracted the metal or something. It was freaky. I was a kid, I swear my parents hit a 80-90-year-old guy along a dirt road. Pulled over the car. Got out and checked on him. And then got back in panic and drove off quickly. I'm pretty sure my dad killed him. I was probably 3 or 4 years old when it happened. My parents deny it has ever happened to this day and chalk it up to imaginative dreams as a child. I think they're lying. Was walking home from a friend's house in college on a really foggy night. Like, this fog was so heavy that it was difficult to see more than 20 feet ahead of you. Anyways, right in front of me I see a large group of people walking towards me and decide that I was going to avoid walking past them because the only people who roll in large groups like that are freshmen. It was around 2 on a Friday and I didn't feel like dealing with drunk idiots. As I'm about to turn onto another street I take another glance at the group and see an American flag waving. Following the flag was a group of Union Civil War soldiers walking 2 by 2 down this path. Curious as to why Civil War reenactors would be around so early in the morning, I kept walking towards them to ask them what they were doing. I shit you not. These soldiers just disappeared into the fog when I got within 15 feet. Like gone. No trace. I went straight to my house and tried to get whatever sleep I could. But the whole situation had me pretty f-ked up. The next day when I was thinking about it I realized that they were walking towards the football stadium, which used to be a Union Civil War camp. Still gives me chills. One time I was pumping gas and was approached by a couple who said they needed a ride. Their car had broken down and they needed to go about a mile up the road to get to their friend's work. Their destination is on my way, so I agree to take them. I pull out my phone and say half jokingly, "Okay, well, I'm just going to send a picture of you guys to my friend to make sure you don't rob me or something, haha." They both simultaneously turn and walk away. They don't say a word. I yell out, "Hey, You're walking the wrong way to get to destination. The man flips me the bird and they keep walking. Neither to where they said their car was nor where they wanted to go. Was about 8 and at my aunt's boyfriend's house who had 2 daughters around my age. It was the 3 of us kids. Their dad. And my dad. We were hanging out in their huge walk-in closet and our dads came up and told us they were going to walk to the gas station, which was like right in front of the apartment and only took about 5 minutes. They left and shut the walk-in closet door and left. Within a couple of minutes, one of us kids had to go to the bathroom or something. We went to open the closet door and it would not open. The door did not have a lock. We panicked and started screaming, and after a couple of minutes, our dads came into the room, started panicking as well. Someone had shoved their dresser in front of the closet door in the few minutes. I was pissed because I thought my dad did it, but a quick scan of our father's faces made us realize it was not them because they were terrified. I don't really remember the aftermath because this was nearly 30 years ago, but I remember it happening. Late 90s, family trip to Disney World. We were driving through rural buttfuck Georgia, nearing the Florida line, running out of gas. We take a random exit and find ourselves in the most scuzzy backwoods gas station I've ever seen. There were possums in cages outside, raccoon jerky and Ziploc bags for sale. And the gas pumps were straight out of the 1950s. I didn't want to go into the bathroom, but I had to pee very badly. I walk into the men's room. 1 urinal. 2 stalls. I look under the stalls. See nothing. Hear nothing. Bathroom empty. I settle at the urinal. Unzip my pants. And begin to pee. As I'm peeing, I see and hear commotion from the nearest stall. Someone is slithering like a snake under the stall wall. He comes closer. And I see it's a black child. A boy. About 8 to 10 years old. Naked as the day he was born. He slithers on the dirty ground right up to the urinal. And lifts his head up exactly even with my junk. He stares straight at it. Says that's not the smallest or the biggest. It's just okay. Then turns around. And slithers back into the stall. Under the wall again. I finish. Zip up. Skip hand washing. And leave as fast as I can. To this day, I have no idea what any of that was about. Next door neighbors are kind of old. And since they're retired, run a sort of mega babysitting company thing to keep busy. A bunch of people in the neighborhood drop their kids at the ends. These people don't have much control over these children. And we don't have a fence separating our backyards. So one night, these people are holding a slumber party of sorts. Right next door. I can't f***ing sleep because of the screaming shit next door. So I get up and go to the bathroom. I look out the bathroom window. And a crap ton of little kids are standing in my backyard. Very still. Staring at the stars or some shitty like that. I probably should have connected the dots from there. But in the moment, I was freaking the FCK out. The next day, I found little handprints on most of my downstairs windows. I used to live in a rented house that, along with my neighbors, sat across the street from a fairly bustling city park. At night, when the park was deserted, I would walk out my front door and sit on my porch and look at the trees and the stars. One night, around 1 AM, I opened the front door and started to sit down. That's when I saw a man standing in the deserted park. He was directly in front of my house. The man was dressed all in black and was wearing a Halloween skull mask. The mask seemed fairly intricate but was most definitely a store-bought cheapo. The sight of this guy sent a chill down my spine. He didn't move at all, although I know he saw me. The entire neighborhood was silent and still, and we just paused there holding our ground. We watched each other for a long time and then he sauntered away. I ended up calling the cops because I figured this guy was casing the neighborhood. Cops came. Took my statement. Nothing ever came of it. Couple of months later, I'm doing some yard work around the side of my house. I'm pulling a huge tangle of weeds out from a thicket underneath my kitchen window. I see something that looks like trash. Pick it up. It's the mask I saw that night. Late 80s. I'm around 13. Me and my friend spent a lot of time going through the miles of abandoned apartment complexes that were eventually destroyed to make room for the 105 freeway in Downey, CA. I believe these were taken through eminent domain and tons of stuff got left behind by the tenants. So it was always an Indiana Jones style adventure to us. One day as it's getting dark, we find a room in one of the apartments that has a bunch of kinky SX toys. An inflatable doll. Stacks of nudie mags. And a little bag of dicks, rubber ones. But still counts. Among other things. There's also a mattress in the room and clothes hanging in the closet. We start grabbing anything interesting, no idea why we wanted the bag of dicks. We were pretty bad kids though, so it couldn't have ended well, and I start shuffling through the clothes hanging in the closet. As I get about halfway through, I notice the last coat has pants and boots under it. Then I look up and realize there's an old man, maybe late 50s, standing in the corner of the closet. Stiff as a board. Eyes wide open and staring at me. I had to stand there staring back until my mind accepted what I was seeing, because it was getting pretty dark in there and it was almost like I was in denial over it. After a few seconds of our shared moment, I just turned and walked out of the room and found my friend, and we ran to his house as fast as we could. We told his uncle about it and all he did was yell at us and confiscate our bag of dicks. Have told this before. When I was in my 20s I would often go car camping by myself. Well, usually I took my cat, Oberon, along. I would drive out of town onto back roads in the mountains. Find a likely spot and spend a couple of nights and days reading, walking, communing with nature. This was my therapy and a relief from the city and life stress. One day I found a place that seemed perfect. Up off an old logging road. There was a little meadow with a large, round, flat rock. There were trees around. And a small brook. My cat, Oberon, was special. I think he was part black lab. He loved traveling with me. I set out a lunch for us. I like nice things. So I set out a placemat, a cloth napkin, a bottle of good beer, cookies, and a perfect sandwich. Oberon went into the trees. And I went after him. He was just nosing around. And it was so beautiful that I walked a bit alongside the creek for a short way. We were out of sight from my lunch. I think I was gone for maybe 15 minutes. When we went back to the rock table, our lunch had been eaten. But not like an animal had gotten to it. The beer was opened. My Swiss Army knife was opened to the bottle opener and put aside. The sandwich had a crust left with an obvious human bite mark left. The napkin crumpled and laid on the plate. The packet of cookies opened along the seam. We left. In a hurry. I could not get out fast enough. Thank goodness I did not unpack anything more than my picnic. Oberon was upset. He put his ears back and was very tense. I wonder who was there. Or maybe I don't. One time I was driving home from a friend's house over winter break a few years ago. It was really late at night. About 2:30 AM. I decided to go on the back road to my house because it's a little faster and about 7 less miles than the highway. This particular road I was on, after midday traffic, isn't a real popular road at all. Except for those who live on it. Well, while driving, I took a big turn. I noticed one vehicle coming the opposite direction. And one in front of me. Strange. But nothing out of the ordinary. I passed the car going the opposite direction and it was a white van. I got behind the car in front of me, which was a truck. As soon as I got behind the truck, the van stopped and quickly turned around. From that point on for about 2 miles the truck went really slow while the van rode my ass the entire way. I was scared shitless. Why did the van immediately stop going one way and turn around to go behind me? Especially that late at night. Both the truck and the van slammed on their brakes when we got to a part of the road without any street lights. And I managed to barely squeeze through both cars stopping and raced home. I was going 75 miles per hour on a road that has a 30 mile per hour limit. I never felt so afraid in my life. I called the cops after and told them the license plate number and description of the truck in front of me. Took me months to be able to go down that road again. A spring break trip. A friend and I got dropped off at the front gate to our condo. A security guard saw us and kept insisting on walking us up to the room. We kept saying no and he seemed kinda weird. He followed us into the elevator and I stood as close as I could to the buttons. He kept making weird comments and telling us how hot we were. We kept bringing up how all of our boyfriends and our guy friends were in the room waiting on us and how there were like 10 people staying there. When the elevator hit our floor, we took off running as fast as we could. 2 weeks later after we came home, there was a news story about the same security guard. He followed a girl onto the elevator and made her perform sexual favors before he'd let her go. Edit. Found the article about it. He didn't pay her. It was almost 6 years ago. He locked 3 girls in the elevator with him and tried to touch their boobs and threatened to evict them. 2 were minors. He was arrested for false imprisonment. I didn't use the word pay because it never said anything about pay in the article. Was at home alone playing Assassin's Creed 4 on a dark but calm night when I hear a massive thump upstairs. Like a heavy piece of furniture falling over. I head upstairs. And everything is in place. Nothing out of place. I thought it may have been a raccoon. So I searched the attic. Nothing. So I go back to gaming. And eventually decide to take a shower. As I'm heading upstairs, something taps a few times on my window 30 plus feet off the ground. No trees nearby. I look outside. Nothing. So I get in the shower and hear heavy footsteps in the hall outside the door. And then the bathroom light goes out. Oh hell no. I get out of the shower, grab my machete, and search every corner of the house. After extensive searching, I find nothing. Eventually I give up. Make sure all the doors and windows are locked. And go to bed. At about 2 AM. I randomly woke up and a small apparition with a visible face drifted out of my large open closet and over the foot of my bed. I have never believed in ghosts. But that night made me question my skepticism. A few years ago I was bow hunting in a large national forest in northern Wisconsin. It was early November and all the leaves were off the trees. I ended up staying in my tree stand way too late and didn't start walking out until it was almost completely dark. The walk out from where I was consisted of about 3/4 of a mile walking through dense jack pines and mixed hardwoods before hitting a logging trail that would take me to my car about a mile down the trail. I had been walking for about 10 minutes when I started getting the sensation that I was being followed. I eventually hit the logging road. After a few hundred yards I heard something walking in the woods a little ways behind me. As I kept walking it became obvious that I was being followed. Every time I slowed my pace or stopped walking I could hear whatever it was come to a stop as well. I'd seen predators in the area before, but every time I'd seen bears or wolves they were afraid and didn't want anything to do with a human. Whatever it was continued to follow me almost the entire way out to my car. As soon as I got in remote range, I hit the panic button on my key remote and set off my car's alarm. I kept it going until I got all the way back to my car. Never did figure out what was following me, but it was by far the spookiest feeling I have ever experienced. My mother called me. "Did you use me as a job reference?" she asked. "You have to let me know if you do that." She had mentioned once that since we had different last names she'd be happy to lie to any employers. I have never taken her up on this. But sure enough, someone had called her to ask about me. I discounted it. A few days later my stepmother, Linda, calls with a similar story. She said the woman on the phone was really sweet and just wanted to check references that I obviously must have given her. Linda and I have different names, and aside from her marriage license to my father, nothing connects us. Somebody was calling around to check up on me. Linda gave me the caller ID number, but when you call it went straight to a voicemail with a default message. A week later I got a call on my band's booking number. It's a Google Voice number for just this purpose. "Hello," she said. "I found your band online and want to book you. Do you have a show coming up where we could see you?" The caller I'd matched. It was her. I panicked. I should have named a place and waited for her there. Instead I asked, "Why did you call my family?" She flusteredly denied it and made a quick excuse to hang up. Calling back. Straight to voicemail. I never got an answer about it to this day. Creepy in retrospect, but I think still counts. My parents used to have some friends that they would hang out with, go camping with, etc. They had 3 children. 2 boys and a girl. If our parents were having a good night and we were tired, we'd just sleep on the couch or on the floor in the kids' rooms. Bit of a sleepover until we were bundled into a car. We moved away though and lost contact. Found out years later that one of the boys was jailed for repeatedly raping his sister from a very young age. My parents hid it from us for a long time and my mum still gets pretty upset about it. And that we had all slept there. So terrible. You never believe these things could possibly happen to people you know. This kinda reminds me of an old family friend. I adored this man as a young girl and always went running into his arms when he came to visit. I found out years later that he raped my older sister. Makes me sick to my stomach to think about. Almost drowned once in the middle of a public water park when I was 6 years old. Everyone around me just watched it happen without lifting up a finger. As a former lifeguard, drowning doesn't look like the drowning they show in movies. It can be hard to spot. I was told you can't really see someone drowning because the moment it goes wrong you can pretty much no longer wave your arms. Does that mean that as a lifeguard you are pretty much just looking for people suddenly disappearing? There was one moment when I was little. I was swimming in the ocean on the coast of France where the waves got really high at some point. Every wave would force me underneath and I tried to get back to the shore and was unable. I started crying and waving. I wasn't drowning since I had plenty of time to catch my breath every in-between wave, but my parents just thought I was waving to them and they waved back. Luckily there was a kind French man who grabbed me and carried me onto the shore. I'll probably get buried as it's not super scary, but I was at my best friend's house when I was 18. In the house at the time apart from me was my friend and his dad. I was coming down his hallway towards his kitchen at the end of the hallway. Just before the kitchen was a door on the right that led to a sitting room. As I walked I saw the back of somebody just disappearing into the living room. I didn't think anything of it. Either my friend or his dad. Right? I got to the kitchen just as my friend walked out of the annex leading off from the kitchen on the left, opposite side of the house from the living room. Then his dad emerged from behind him. I started and said, "If you're both here, who just went into the living room?" They looked at each other confused and said, "There's no one else here." I told them what I saw. They told me that my friend's mum had also reported seeing someone a number of times in the hallway. Additionally, she had woken to see a woman sitting on her bed just staring at her who then disappeared. She had also woken up to the weight and feel of their dog lying on the bed and had spent a few moments petting him before remembering their dog was dead. At which point it disappeared. Yeah. I decided I wasn't gonna stay over there anymore. Stroke. Kinda creepy at the time, but scary afterwards. Long time ago, driving from Boral to Berrimah in New South Wales, a state in Australia. My wife and I were flagged down by a guy asking to borrow a car jack because his van, which he said was his sister's, and yes it was white, had a flat and his jack didn't work. Guy was creepy and we just said nah mate and took off. A while later we saw the photo of the serial killer Ivan Millett, who had been caught by then. Pretty sure it was him and the van fitted. When I was about 6, and my sister was about 15, we woke up to her screaming like a f***ing banshee. Turns out she had convinced herself there was someone in our backyard watching her between a crack in the curtains. And then something tapped on the window. She flipped her shitty and got the FCK out of there. After 3 hours or our mother saying it's just a dream, she finally goes to sleep. The next morning I decide to investigate further. There were footprints outside her window. Also, same year, we were sleeping in the lounge room watching movies and heard our mother get up, walk all the way up our hallway, move a small clothes rack, have a smoke and go to bed. Then we realized our mother was snoring the whole time. The scariest part? My sister left me. We both decided to run, but I was tucked in and tangled, so she got the FCK out of there, and by the time I got out the blanket she was fucking gone. Edit. I remembered a funny one. When my sister finally got over the first two and was sleeping okay again, we again woke up to her freaking out. Turns out, in the middle of the night her poster of The Undertaker, WWE, had fallen on her. So all she saw was a massive dude float down and land on top of her. Ah. Good times. Here's my story from last summer. A friend of mine and me were having fun in Bulgaria. He was driving a silver BMW M3 going at 200 kph in the ring road around the city. We were casually doing drags against other similar cars and nothing interesting happened really. Went home and slept. In the morning I wake up and I see in the news 2 young men crashed with a BMW M3 on the same road that we were driving at about 200 kph and crashed in a post. I think it's funny at first and text a couple of mates on Facebook that we talk every day to look at the thing. Nobody responds and that gets a bit creepy. My father walks into the room and he ignores me. At that point I am really freaked out and reach out to my friend that was driving, and he hasn't spoken to anyone that day. So I am sitting there wondering if I am dead for hours before I was able to convince myself it's okay. Still feel the emotion from that morning when I am telling the story. I was in Sun Valley Mall in Pleasant Hill, California in 1984 with my then wife and new baby son. I was looking in the window of a men's store on one end of the mall a few hundred yards from JCPenney's. When I turned around, an Asian guy and a white guy were way too close to my wife and son, and she looked a little scared. She was a tiny woman with a new baby. I overreacted a bit when I went over and was pretty hostile. The white guy looked at me, then gestured at my wife, and said to the Asian guy, "Miranda?" The Asian guy looked at me, and how angry I already was, and said to the other, "No." Then both turned and walked out of the mall without saying anything else. A couple months later there were pictures of Charles Ng and Leonard Lake all over the Bay Area. To this day, I'm convinced that if I would not have been there, she and Nordstedt, Jr., would have been killed. There's a similar AskReddit thread years ago. It was the first one I read. Turns out that Arp's uncle was picked up by an older guy and given a ride. The driver made a left instead of a right during the ride and made a pass at the young passenger. Kid freaked out and at the next stoplight he made a run for it. Weeks later he sees a news report regarding John Wayne Gacy being caught, and when asked why he didn't have door handles on the inside of his car he said to not let anyone escape again. TLDR, John Wayne Gacy fixed a problem. Please bear with me since English wasn't my primary language. This started out when I was 14-year-old, and during that time, I grew deeply afraid of being alone in the dark. Mainly because I scare that there might be something lurking in it. So being a young and stupid me, I always play a religious music, Buddhism, before I went to bed, as for some reason it nurtured the feeling of being afraid. Upon one night when my mum suddenly woken up from her dream and noticing the music I was playing, she immediately walked out from her room and came to mine and woken me up and told that this kind of music attracts ghosts. Upon hearing to her reason, I closed the music and she went to bed in her room. After 1 hour, I woke up from my slumber and started hearing a scratching sound. I looked out through my window and there it is. A mother effing shadow fiend lookalike flying past my window. Being a 14-year-old me, I acted like I saw nothing and immediately closed my eye for 4 hours until my other family member woken up and comes knocking. Edit. Chinese English GG. My parents live very close to railroad tracks, like less than 100 yards away. As I was walking home from a friend's house one night I noticed something white on the tracks. I decided to get a closer look because it was too dark to see exactly what it was. It was a man in a white t-shirt passed out on the tracks. I was too afraid to go near him, so I went inside the house and got my dad. He walked over to the man and tried getting him to wake up. When the man finally woke up, he was pissed that my dad had bothered him. He was trying to commit suicide because his girlfriend had left him. My dad attempts to make him get off the tracks, but guy wasn't having any of it and he punched my dad in the face. He was heavily intoxicated. My mom eventually called the police and they came to pick the man up. I'm not sure whatever happened to him. So you know how when you look into a dark window or door or hallway you think you see a face or person? Well, when I was younger, I think 12, my room was upstairs and had the window that would reflect all the shadows of what's outside into the opposing wall. I never wanted to stare out the window, so I out my bed against that wall so that I could look at the shadows and know if anything is there. Mind plays tricks and I'd always think something weird is up. My parents always would say to stop waking them up because no one is going to be floating 30 feet up. So one time I really thought the shadow looked like a head. But I didn't want to look back up. I finally did and there was a dark face staring right into my room. I freak out and run to tell my parents. After convincing them it's not a false alarm, they go and see there's nothing outside the window. The next morning when we are leaving for school we realize there's a giant ladder, not ours, propped up against the side of our house right at my window. There was actually someone there looking at me or in my room. We built a big ass fence and I switched rooms. I'll still never forget those eyes staring right at me. When I was younger, I was driving down an unfamiliar country road at night by myself with a car that was in good condition and never had any problems. Well, out of the blue, my headlights went out. I kinda freaked out but kept my cool and just eased the brakes on a little and came to a stop. Well, as soon as I did, my headlights came on again and I found myself stopped right at the edge of a pretty sharp drop off. I never had any more problems with the headlights after that. July 1991. I was working 2 jobs. One as a night auditor at a large hotel. The other a day job at an executive recruiting firm. One Monday night around 11 PM one of the recruiters I was friends with at the firm called me while I was working the busy hotel switchboard. She was frantic and was telling me that Shari's son. He killed a bunch of people. It's on the news. It's just now unfolding. I was thinking he went on some shooting rampage at a McDonald's or something and killed some folks. I couldn't talk because of the busy switchboard calls. So I told her we'd talk tomorrow and hung up. The son's name was Jeffrey Dahmer. Oh. I have night terrors every now and then, and as a child I used to sleepwalk, but as I grew older it kinda stopped. About 2 years ago I went to sleep early around 7 PM and had a dream that started at a movie theater. Everybody was standing not sitting down and I missed what the actor said, so I asked out loud, "What did she say?" And everybody started sushing me saying that she might hear me. Then the actress on the screen turned to me and her face was all white and decaying and she yelled and jumped from the screen, so I started to run and a stairway appeared and it looked like the one Rose went up to meet Jack at the end of Titanic, and at the top there were a lot of people who kept telling me to run, so I just kept on running. I ended up at my own balcony and ran to my room when I heard behind me a voice that asked me to stop, so I turn and I see the decaying actress in a white robe walking towards me and I freeze. She jumps on me and starts banging my head on the floor and I pass out. When I woke up my family was crying and asking me to wake up. I was standing right at my living room. The balcony glass door was open and my head ached like hell and there was blood where I was banging it. I was terrified after that night. Getting a haircut. Woman barber was cutting my hair. She's talking, going back and forth. Then she says how beautiful my eyelashes are. Talks about how much she wants them. But she can't pluck them because then they'll just die, so she'll take the straight razor she's using to do my edges to slice off a bit of my eyelids and then sew onto her own. She got really detailed into how she was going to remove my eyelids. I bet being a hairdresser can be mind-shatteringly boring at times, and that letting your mind go walkabout and trying to get a rise out of people and freak them out is the only thing keeping you from drinking the blue comb water. Morning, my 4-year woke me up and hands me the phone and says it's Gigi, the kid's name for their great grandmother. I didn't hear the phone ring, but I figured he just picked it up before it had woken me. I called my grandmother and nobody answered. I had an odd feeling about the call, so I called my mom and asked her if anything was going on with her mother. And she said she hadn't heard anything and that as far as she knew everything was fine. Sometime around 8 hours later I get a call from my mom to tell me that Gigi had collapsed, was taken to the hospital and was going to be fine. She wanted to know how I knew something was going on. Hard to explain that one. I asked my grandma later if she had called that morning and she said she hadn't. Best comment of the day. I had this creepy guy eyeing me and my kids in the airport, particularly my then 4-year-old daughter. He came over and sat uncomfortably close to us. He gave me a really uneasy feeling, so I made both my kids sit on my lap and FaceTimed my husband. I turned my phone over to show his face to my husband and my husband said, "Who the hell is that?" He promptly got up and left. Fucking creep. I don't play about my kids and watch too many crime TV shows to not pay attention to my surroundings.